Hello! In this video we are going to be looking at David Chalmers' zombie argument for property dualism. So let's just look at some basics first. A philosophical zombie is physically identical to a human being but does not have any thoughts, feelings or experiences of any kind. In other words, it has no consciousness, no qualia. However, both the normal human and the zombie behave in identical ways in exactly the same situations. And the zombie has a brain that operates in exactly the same way as a human brain. And of course, it is certainly possible to imagine such creatures existing. Indeed, how do we know that others are not zombies? And this view is known as mind skepticism. You know, you're skeptical about the view that others have minds as you do, that others have the experiences that you do. And it's worth also pointing out at this stage that this is sometimes characterized as an asymmetry between the first person I and the third person or third parties. Okay, so I can know the contents of my own mind. I can know that I have thoughts and feelings and experiences. But I cannot know with the same degree of certainty that others have similar thoughts, feelings and experiences. So what is it exactly and how is it that Chalmers argues for property dualism? Well, remember, property dualism is physicalist in that it suggests that consciousness and qualia have physical causes, but that they are at the same time non-physical. Right. So Chalmers' argument for property dualism runs as follows. He says that since it is possible to conceive of zombies existing, how, for example, do you know that I'm not a zombie? It is therefore possible to conceive of qualia as non-physical. Okay, so why does he think this? Well, let's just think about objects and colour first of all. If we imagine an object, we cannot conceive of an object without colour. Right? For a physical object to exist, it must have colour. All right. However, we can imagine a being identical to a human being that acts like a human being with a brain like a human being, not having experiences. All right. So it's logically possible for a zombie to be physically identical to a human being but not have any thoughts, feelings or experiences of any kind, in the same way that it is logically impossible for an object not to have colour. So, if qualia can as such be shown to be non-physical, then it must mean that property dualism is true. All right. So since we can imagine a being that is identical to a human being that has no thoughts and feelings, it must therefore mean that qualia is something separate from the physical. Okay. So we can therefore, through this argument, make the case that qualia is in fact non-physical, and that must mean that property dualism is true. Let's now look at some objections to this idea. It is certainly possible that something can be logically possible without it being physically possible. All right? For example, it is logically possible that the laws of physics might be other than they actually are. But it just so happens that the way the universe is means that it's not physically possible. Okay, so zombies might be logically possible, but in the current laws of the universe, in the way that the universe just happens to be, they are not physically possible. All right? So you can argue that as the universe is, and human beings are a part of the universe, that qualia is actually physical after all. All right? Just because it's logically possible that it might not be does not mean that it's physically possible under our current conditions. And why not instead assume that consciousness, i.e. the mind, is a property of a physical thing in much the same way as colour is a secondary property of a physical thing. This seems to be something that can be accommodated by the way the universe is. Now, of course, Chalmers, or anyone supporting the idea of property dualism through the zombie argument, might make the claim, well, look, it's not that qualia is not the same as colour, because you cannot imagine a physical object without colour, but you can imagine a zombie without consciousness. Okay, so that's a possible counter-argument. That then is the end of this video. I have put some literature up on this one to help you, so do have a read through that as well.